I would like to talk to you a little bit about economics. A little bit. And about the tipping point that the world is at right now. Okay? Now, the interesting thing about tipping points is everybody thinks when there's a tipping point that it's new. But it's not. They happened before. Tipping points always happen. So Trump and Brexit and what's happened in China and all these things, they all happen before. But you always think if the economics, you come up with charts and graphs and mathematics and equations and all that stuff. No. I'm an Irish economist, so we don't do that. In Ireland, we come up with poetry. We are armed only with poetry. And I want to do is read from you a fantastic one. There's a beautiful book called The Selected Poetry of W.B. Yeats, our national poet. And I want to show you why these tipping points happened before. Yeats wrote in this year, 100 years ago, 1918, a most beautiful poem called The Second Coming. And in this poem, he foresees the future in an extraordinary way. And the poem goes a wee bit like this. It starts by turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed on the world, a blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the procession of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Sometimes everything that we take for granted disappears. And why? Because the best people in society lack all conviction. And the worst people in society are full of passionate intensity. If this does not explain or at least repeat what is going on now, nothing does. This is the world in 1918. And the poet in 1918, he was forecasting the end of the Austrian Empire, the end of the Russian Empire, the end of the German Empire, the emergence and dominance of the Soviet Union. He was also talking about incipient anti-Semitism emerging in Europe. And the question I have for you is, in 1918, if you look back at all the historians, at the military people, at the journalists, at the civil servants, all the people who then were paid to see the future, none of them saw it as clearly as the poet. The poet nailed it. And all the people who were employed to tell us what was going to happen, none of them saw this happening. The question is, why? Why poetry? Now, I believe it is because the poet or the artist amongst us gives themselves the permission to think unconventionally. And at a tipping point in the world, you need to think unconventionally. Because the conventional man always thinks that things will go back to where they were, but sometimes they don't. But the problem for us is, do we reward unconventional thinking? How the economy works, okay? And how we are all affected by it, and how our decisions all impact on each other, and we don't even understand it. So imagine you are at a football match, right? A football match, okay? Or ice hockey, or whatever you play up here, baseball or whatever, right? Imagine you're at a football match. And by that I mean football like real football, not American football. The bit that's missing in American football is the foot, right? I was watching it last night on television. It should be called arm ball, or even more specifically, elbow ball. There's no foot. I don't know where they get the foot bit. What happened there, right? So when you're watching elbow ball the next time, right? And you're all sitting in the stadium, it's all good, and you've got a great view. Everything's fine. And then the game starts to heat up, and the dude in front of you stands up. And you've got to stand up to get a view. And then the person behind you's got to stand up, and then the person behind you got to stand up, and the person who stood up in the first place, he has no idea that by standing up he throws the gauntlet down to you to do something different. but he does. So you have to stand up, you have to stand up, you have to stand up. And then suddenly the entire stadium is standing when we had paid to sit. This is how the economy works. Suddenly prices go up, people buy posh things, somebody else sees them, and away we go. This is how it is. This is the business cycle. And the business cycle then feeds into the political tipping points. But the best way in your heads to give yourself a sense of understanding the world is to pick up the artist, the poet, and not look at the world through the lens of a spreadsheet, or an accountant, God forbid, or a fund manager, another strange creature from the depths of MBA schools, okay, of which there are many strange bottom feeders, I believe, okay? No, it's just an observation. Try, ladies and gentlemen, when you're next looking at economics, to think like a poet unconventionally, and then things will become much, much clearer. Thank you very much.